You said Northern California. Would that be Sacramento County or Yolo?
No, the Bay Area. Santa Monica has it.
Santa Monica has it.
Marin County has
Marin
it.
County.
The 9 Bay Area counties is fairly
Usually the
common.
most liberal areas that have
Wealthy residents.
Remember also,
Davis has several Davis people here. I suspect they have several parcel taxes.
I think Davis has 3 parcel taxes. But remember that parcel taxes have a term. And so unlike brick and mortar geo bond, which is an amount of money, you have an amount of dollars also for a parcel tax, but it terms out 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. And it can be reauthorized and continue. You can have a revote. But we always consider, we get nervous about parcel taxes because they're a form really of temporary revenue. And so to the extent that you put dollars from parcel tax in things that require ongoing funding forever, you run the risk of not being able to reauthorize them over time. And then the fund of last resort is the general fund.
There's some cities that help to subsidize their districts too.
Yes.
San Francisco is a good example. City of San Francisco subsidizes their school districts.
Santa Monica, Malibu, I believe, does. Several cities do that.
But there's just a lot of districts that are about to hit a wall of pain that I don't think they fully anticipated.
They do not.
Because you're absolutely right. Their growth rate's not at the rate that they've come to expect. And you know, my remembrance was that part of the LCFF deal was that the governor was going to help with regards to lowering the threshold for partial tax passages. And yet, you know, doesn't seem to be part of the conversation. So it's extraordinarily, the reason why you never heard of it, John, is because it's really difficult to pass.
It is. It's a lot of work.
So, you know, part of your job, I can only assume, is you're going to start to see some different kinds of districts getting onto your negative and conditional lists because of this new financing change, and dealing with those challenges and all the politics associated with that, and helping them with their local revenue, you know, is going to be part of your job, I can only assume.
Great observation.
Yeah, and the first indication of that will be the smalls and tinies. As Mike says, smalls 2,400 and below, the tinies, you know, 5,600, ADA and below. They'll start to show up first because they simply have no economy of scale. And then as that occurs, then the next group of those are the mids, the larges and the bigs. But it will cross all geographic borders in California and really all economies in California.
Okay, it looks like we've exhausted the questions from my colleagues.
No, we haven't.
So-
we're gonna slow down for you, Marty.
So in that case, no, this is the first of 4 issues we have to discuss today. We've gone a little bit over an hour, which is fine, just a time check. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for very interesting, thorough analysis of our economic situation with our schools. Now we'll call up our
Good to see you again, Michael.
second panel. Second panel dealing with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, Kimberly Leahy from the Department of Finance, and Dr. Mary Sandy, Executive Director of CTC. Okay, we'll begin with Ms. Leahy.
Good afternoon. Kimberly Leahy with the Department of Finance. I'm here to present the governor's budget proposal. The governor's budget includes $22,282,000 in teacher credential fund, $4,460,000 test development and administration account dollars, $2,533 million in one-time general fund, and $308,000 in reimbursement authority, for a total operating budget of $29,583,000. The governor's budget also includes 150.9 total authorized positions. However, when you look at the display, you will see that it reflects 139.6 positions, and this is part of the recent budget transparency movement to reflect historical trends in actual filled positions. So the 139.6 is the expectation of filled positions for the budget year. The changes to the ongoing operational budget for the Commission in total include minor adjustments for salary increases and other inflationary pressures, and a decrease in the one-time non-Proposition 98 general fund that was provided for special projects. Of the general fund expenditure included in the governor's budget, that provides $1,533,000 non-proposition general fund, non-proposition 98 general fund for continued work on streamlining and strengthening the accreditation system at the commission. It also includes $1 million non-proposition 98 general fund and expenditure authority for continued work on the teacher performance assessment and the administrator performance assessment. I'd be happy to answer any questions when we get to the questions section. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on now to Dr. Sandy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members. It's a pleasure to be with you. I want to thank your staff for a very thorough analysis in this agenda. Thank you for that. Just by way of recollection, the commission is appointed by the governor. We have a 19-member commission that oversees policy for teacher preparation and licensure. We have, with our 150 staff, we have three primary functions. The first is to set standards for and accredit preparation leading to credentials. The second is to issue credentials to people that earn them. And the third is to discipline educators who engage in misconduct. Last year, in the 14-15 year, we processed 237,000 credential applications. We opened 5,400 discipline cases and took action on just under 1,000 of them. We have responsibility for accrediting 254 separate entities that prepare the workforce, and we engaged in about 40 accreditation site visits during the year. So after several years of decline, the Commission's budget is in much better shape in this year than it has been. Between 13-14 and 14-15, we saw about a 4% increase in our credential revenues, which was very helpful. In 15-16, we saw an increase in the fee from $70 to $100, and overall we're seeing an increase of just about 2% in the numbers of credential applications that we're processing at this point this year based on last year's numbers. So for 2015-16, we are within, our expenditures are within the budget, and we are able to operate on all fronts, which is a good thing. We haven't always had that story to tell at this committee. So in the past year, we've been deeply engaged in overhauling our accreditation system. We have revised all of our standards for teacher preparation, both at the university level and for induction. We've updated examinations to align with the Common Core standards and the Next Generation Science standards. We are developing and implementing surveys for graduates of programs and for their employers, looking to use those data to help us with our accreditation work. We're developing, or we've reduced the scope of our standards so that we're focusing far more intently on what teachers need to know and be able to do, and on the outcomes of preparation, and less on documenting every single minute of seat time that a teacher may engage in during preparation. We've revised our induction standards considerably, and that has been an issue in this building we've been discussing for a couple of years. We've primarily refocused induction programs on prioritizing mentoring and reducing the amount of seat time and documentation and just paperwork that teachers need to do while they're in their induction program. We have found that that is the most valuable experience that teachers are getting and reporting to us. So the new standards just adopted by the Commission will refocus intently on mentoring as the primary focus. And finally, we've been developing a data warehouse and data dashboard system, and this is very exciting work for us, moving from the 19th century to the 21st century in a single leap this year, and we're really excited to be able to show some of the progress from that. The general fund provided in our budget has enabled us to do this work and to meet a fairly aggressive timeline on time and within budget. In the first year, and just the year that we're in right now, we've been building a data warehouse to house all of the data that we currently hold in the building in different manners and different forms. And we're beginning to create dashboards that will reflect in an online way, in a searchable way, information about teacher assignment and teacher supply. Those are the first two dashboards we've released, and it's tremendously interesting to see that work unfold. As we transition into year two next year, we're looking at our institutions, all the institutions we accredit, and looking at how we can put together a profile for each one of those institutions. So you would have ready access at the push of a button on your web page to understand what the scope of preparation is in California, where preparation, what's happening with preparation in each region, enrollments, production numbers, the numbers and types of credentials that are being issued, et cetera. So that will be really the work that unfolds next year. We're working with the institutions that we accredit to put together data collection, an annual data collection process where they will be presenting data that goes into the warehouse and populates these databases. So that's been a very interactive process with the institutions that will be featured in this system. With regard to the performance assessment work, we have issued a contract to begin the work on the California Teaching Performance Assessment redesign. That work is just getting underway right now. We anticipate releasing a contract to begin work on the administrator performance assessment next month, and that work will also begin almost immediately. By the 17-18 year, we expect to have those assessments fully operational for candidates and the ability to use the data from those assessments, again, to inform our accreditation work. So we began our efforts to do all this streamlining and overhauling during a time when we weren't experiencing a teacher shortage. And as we've moved into this critical period where shortages are so prevalent, we've been also considering how the commission might be able to develop opportunities for different kinds of permits and credentials, and look at how we can reduce some of the regulatory requirements that might be serving as a roadblock. So one very interesting piece that we're just in the process of developing is a new permit for, it's called a temporary permit for statutory leave, which would allow an individual to serve as a substitute teacher for up to 1 year in a single classroom. Currently, a substitute is limited to 30 days of service in a single classroom for a general education classroom and 20 days of service in that class in a classroom on a special ed assignment. So this new permit that we're looking to create, which should be available, we hope, this summer or early fall, pending the adoption of our regulations, will allow someone with some training, with subject matter competence, and with a BA to serve for up to a year in a single classroom to fulfill statutory leave. Somebody's on maternity leave or some other extended medical leave. We believe that this opportunity, in fact, the employer community came forward and asked us to build this, and we believe it will provide some assistance to them as they look to staff classroom vacancies that they're having and the severe shortage of substitute teachers across the state. This is another option that will become available, all things being equal. So the budget for next year will allow us to complete these projects and live within our budget and continue to operate on all fronts. We fully support the governor's budget, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for that. Ask my colleagues first. Senator Morlock, any questions?
Just one, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I don't see any graphs, but based on the last topic, how are we doing in certain school districts? Do we have any metrics such as the ones we discussed earlier, Inglewood, LA Unified? Everyone's
So how are we doing with respect to
certification.
certification?
You got X number of teachers, X number of certifications should be equal, right? And so I'm just wondering what that would look like for.
So I don't have those data with me, but I'd be happy to provide those to you in a follow-up. If you can be patient, we'd be happy to get you that information.
That's fine. I'm just, so if you don't get your certification, you don't pass the exams, then what, you're let go?
Well, teachers typically have to have some form of certification in order to work in the school. So either
It's
they
mostly entry level then.
Yeah. So if they have a teaching credential, they're good to go. But there are an array of emergency-style permits that are also in use. And in fact, we'll talk about this in your third panel some more, but the largest growth area that we're seeing in terms of credentials that we're issuing is in the emergency permit substitute area, and that's not universal across the state. There are certain areas of the state that are experiencing greater shortages and greater need for those types of permits. And our dashboard, in fact, if I had a demo, I'd love to show you what's happening in the LA Basin. So we'll save that for another time.
Thank you, Senator Morlock. Senator Allen?
No, thanks.
Okay, in that case, I'm ready to move on to the next topic. And for panel, issue number 3, panel 2, under CTC, we have Kimberly Leahy staying with us, Nanette Rufo she's Chief Counsel and Director of the Division of Professional Practices, and Julie Wayne Gutierrez, Senior Assistant Attorney General, Office of the Attorney General. The topic is teacher misconduct and the workload that CTC is seeing. We'll begin with Ms. Leahy.
I'm actually going to defer to Nanette Rufo from the Commission on the initial presentation.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Senators. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon and talk to you about the important work being done. One of the things I'd like to do is really firmly stamp a stamp of old business on the auditor's deficiencies that your staff analysis contains on page 16 and 17. Those were indeed a very serious list of deficiencies, but as your staff analysis also correctly points out, the auditor cleared those deficiencies back in 2012 and then returned again for a re-audit in 2014, and also to ensure that the commission had indeed implemented all the corrections that were needed. And in 2014, we again received a clean bill of health from the state auditor. So we think that's really important to note about how the commission has revised and updated and changed how it handles discipline. We're a fresh new agency on that front. One of the things, though, that has come out of that is back in 2012, we have a couple significant trends emerge that really affect the issue in front of you today. And that's to get rid of the backlog of cases waiting for action by a body called the Committee of Credentials. We doubled the number of cases going into the committee. So that doubling of cases increased the number of appeals where our office is represented by the Office of the Attorney General. In addition, we saw, as part of that increase, we saw a tripling of cases reported by school districts. We used to get 200 to 250 reports a year. Now we're getting 700 to 750 a year. Those cases typically can be quite complex, involving multiple witnesses, and are more difficult cases for the Attorney General's office and take more time for them to handle. So we now have had a few years of this, so we know that our data isn't a blip, it's an ongoing workload. When we talked to you last year about this same time, and with the support of the administration and the legislature, the fee increase was allocated to help pay for the Attorney General's services. We pay for legal services on an hourly basis. And up until this year, the big constraint was how much could we pay the Attorney General's office? And the Attorney General's office has always worked with us closely to ensure that they provide all the services we can pay for, but not more. But the implementation of this current year's budget significantly increased the resources available to pay for this work, and is now at approximately $5.2 million. We really appreciate the support of the legislature and the administration in dealing with this backlog. And as we've seen this year, the Attorney General's office has been ramping up to deal with both the increased caseload and our increased ability to pay. Right now, though, we're still seeing that caseload continues to increase. While the Attorney General's office is ramping up, we would certainly support any additional staff that they can add to this workload being added. And we also think their plan to dedicate some attorneys to handling just CTC cases is a really good plan, because we think having attorneys who are familiar with this area of law will help expedite those cases. So at this time, we're looking forward to working closely with the Attorney General's office over the next couple of years so we can get this backlog decreased.
Okay, thank you. Moving on now to Ms. Wayne Gutierrez.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and Senators. Thank you for having me today. Julie Wayne Gutierrez, I am the Senior Assistant Attorney General over a section in the Attorney General's office called Health, Education, and Welfare. We handle a broad variety of litigation representing state public entities in any kind of litigation arising, dealing with medical benefits, Medi-Cal, public health issues, social welfare litigation, and education. So we are the section, Health, Education, and Welfare is the section that does handle the teacher discipline matters. And currently, the design of we call it the HEW section. The design of the section, we're staffed with 70 attorneys statewide, and each attorney is a generalist. They handle a variety of litigation spanning all of those subject matter areas. So historically, that's a particular HEW attorney could have anywhere from 20 to 70 cases in a wide variety of subject matter areas. Based on the level of increase, the substantial increase in number of teacher case referrals, we have redesigned our staffing so that we have dedicated attorneys solely handling the teacher discipline matters. So right now, in addition, let me clarify that that is in addition to a general HEW attorney also carrying his or her share of teacher discipline cases. Let me first go to sort of the trends in terms of the increase of cases that we've been receiving from the commission. In going back to 2011 and 12, there were 43 new case referrals. And then that number doubled approximately in fiscal year 12-13 to 83 cases. That was a 93% increase. I think it was 2012 that there was the Bureau of State Audit report that was issued. Then in 2013 and 14, the cases continued to increase to 102 new cases. That's a 23% increase from the prior year. 14-15 fiscal year, we saw 135 new cases, which was then again another 32% increase on top of the earlier year increases. It's only this fiscal year that we're now starting to see the number of cases level off. So we have a projected number of about 138 new cases coming in compared to last year's 135. So in terms of the trends, I mean, based on this year and last fiscal year, we're hoping that it's finally going to stabilize. The Bureau of State Audit report was a huge factor in, I think, the huge number of increase of cases. And in addition, more recently, there was AB 1452, which codified Education Code Section 44939.5, which was a strong message to school districts and administrators that they need to do reporting. If they have employment issues with their teachers, they can't just do a silent settlement and brush it under the rug, that there are mandatory reporting obligations to the commission. And I think that that has also factored into the more recent addition of case referrals. So in terms of staffing these cases from the Attorney General's perspective, we are going to be dedicating 5 staff statewide to handle these teacher cases. 3 of those dedicated staff are filled right now, and 2 will be hired by the end of this fiscal year. We are also examining the possibility of hiring on limited term staff in order to address some of the backload and get the numbers down for cases. I'd be happy to address any questions.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple questions, and we'll go to my colleagues. Ms. Rufo, you talked a lot about the Attorney General's office ramping up.
Yes.
How is the ramping up process going? We've allocated money. Is it going as quickly as you would have hoped? Or if not, why not?
I think all state agencies are constrained by resources. In prior years, we had to ask them to delay some cases because we had the inability to pay for them. This fee increase was part of the May revise process, and as you know, from a kind of the bureaucratic perspective, that doesn't give you a lot of time to do planning once the budget's enacted in July. And I'm really grateful you did it, so I don't want to sound at all like I'm complaining that we didn't know until July, because that's certainly not the case. But again, I think then you're looking at, the budget's got to get passed before you can start recruitment. You're doing recruitment, you're hiring, you're training, you're planning. I think both the commission and the Attorney General's office would have a shared goal of they would like to see the cases decreasing. And so I think that's why we would support additional resources for the Attorney General to do this work. Because while we've previously had dollar constraints in our budget, the ability to pay for the services, I would assume that, like most state agencies, the Attorney General's office also has staff constraints. And as Ms. Wayne Gutierrez described, they have a substantial caseload from other clients throughout the state.
So if I may also supplement that answer by explaining that the increase in appropriation to the commission does not necessarily translate into an increase in appropriation to the Department of Justice Attorney General's staffing levels. So if there were a parallel, then we would be able, because right now what we're doing, then we'd be able to hire new positions. But right now what we're doing is we're reallocating existing resources, which is not very easy to do when we have static, if not increasing caseloads in other areas.
Well, these millions of dollars have gone to you to pay you. What are you using these millions of dollars for?
So right now, where we are projected in terms of the billings for commission work is at 2.1 million for the end of this fiscal year. And so we have been in very close communication with the commission. And so that's why we are now looking into other options for possible limited term positions. And we're in discussions with the Department of Finance in terms of possible other options out there.
So out of about 5 million, about 2.1 million have been spent thus far?
Yeah, our estimates are that for the total expenditure for both the Attorney General and the Office of Administrative Hearings, who provide the judges to hear the cases, it'll be approximately 2.7 million this year.
So we gave you about 2.4 million too much?
I don't think it's too much because the provisional language in the budget says that money will roll over to the subsequent year. And as you see, we have a significant backlog that continues to grow. We're going to need that money to get these cases done.
And when will that happen? When will you get up to speed so that you're actually cutting into the backlog instead of rolling over money?
I think that at the end of next fiscal year, we will have some data and some statistics, and I'll bring some graphs that will demonstrate the rolling back of the caseload.
And when you go to decrease the backlog, do you prioritize which cases get handled first, or is it a first in, first out?
So there are high priority, normal priority, and low priority cases. The high priority are clearly going to be the ones that involve any kind of physical misconduct with students in the classroom, physical or verbal misconduct. Those are prosecuted. Our goal is from the moment that we receive a case from the commission that we have worked the case file up, created the charging document, and filed and served it within 6 months. For normal priority cases, then that time frame becomes 8 months, and low priority cases, that's 12 months.
Good, that's good. When the governor allocated 5.1 million, was it his intention that only less than half be spent this year and the rest roll over?
Absolutely not. This is a major concern for the administration, and it was our intent that the 5.1 million would be spent during this fiscal year. But we also recognize that the Attorney General's office has been working on staffing up and that they've had some difficulty in filling the positions to do this workload. And we're anticipating that next year, using their provisional authority, they should be able to easily utilize the resources that are available through the commission.
Why the difficulty in filling positions? We keep hearing there are too many lawyers out there who can't find jobs.
There have been challenges in finding staff that are adequately suited to perform the litigation that the Attorney General's office performs. I think I'll leave it at that.
So we've got a lot of incompetent attorneys out there looking for work. Is that what you're saying?
It's a very competitive, it's a competitive office, and we have very high professional standards that we are expected to live up to from the court's perspective, and we want to make sure that we are hiring staff that can meet the requirements and litigate and properly represent public agencies.
You can assure the governor that although you didn't find them this year, you will find them next year?
Yes.
Okay, good, good. Senator Morlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll ask the graph question. I'm just curious on these cases, categories. You mentioned one example of some kind of hostile environment or a hostile activity in the classroom, physical or verbal, but what other categories would there be that you're pursuing?
I think what I would be happy to bring that kind of data the next time I'm invited to speak to you, but I think that a good example is an anecdote, a case that recently was successfully prosecuted. There was a PE teacher who had physically molested some students in his class, left a particular school district under one of those hush-hush settlement agreements, transferred over, got hired on to a different school district, and continued his inappropriate physical misconduct with other students. The local district attorney's office, because of factual discrepancies in terms of being able to meet the burden of proof, declined to prosecute. Then it went forward to a civil lawsuit, which I think ultimately settled. And then after all was said and done, that's when, and this is normally what occurs, that's when the referral went over to the commission, and the commission was able to take an active role in prosecuting taking action against the professional credential and recommended revoking that particular PE teacher's license. And so then the referral came over to the AG's office, and we worked that case up. And so that would be, and we were able to, I just looked at the case file today, and there were a list of 31 witnesses. It was a very, very big case. A lot of dedicated resources went into that case, and we were very happy and pleased that both the administrative law judge's proposed decision and the commission's ultimate final decision was to uphold the revocation. So that's an example of a high priority case. A normal priority case, maybe Ms. Rufo, you could refer.
Yeah, we get a broad gamut of human conduct. We open cases based on, a single drunk driving arrest, up to multiple arrests for offenses, burglary, counterfeiting, theft from the student body fund. We get the real wide range of human conduct. In the cases where we're represented by the Attorney General's office, represent cases where the committee has determined that some adverse action against a license is appropriate, but not all of them are serious. If the committee thinks your credential should be suspended for 7 days, you have the same right to appeal as the sexual predator who the commission thinks their credential should be revoked. And it's the same process. So our cases going over there, as Ms. Gutierrez explained, we categorize them in one of those 3 categories, and it's based on our assessment of kind of the danger to students. But it's not a fine, there's no matrix for that. It's just our best judgment at the time we're making the referral.
The reason I ask is you want to look for trends. What is occurring, what categories are growing or declining, and maybe what geographical areas, just so you can start monitoring and seeing what you can do in the way of training, et cetera. I'm just curious, and do you have expediting strategies? You just say, hey, you are on notice, we are revoking your credential. If you want to appeal, great, or is the process much lengthier than that?
There are 2 kinds of adverse actions. There's a mandatory action. The legislature has enacted statutes that require revocation upon conviction of a lengthy list of criminal statutes. You're convicted of murder, sex offenses, drug offenses involving sales to children, and serious and violent felonies. Those, upon conviction, the commission revokes your credential, and that's the end of their due process. The due process is given in the criminal proceeding. For all others that aren't on that list, there's a very extensive due process requirement prior to the case going to the Attorney General's office, which involve conducting a 2-step investigation and holding a hearing in front of a body called the Committee of Credentials. And their job is to determine probable cause. That step alone takes an average of a year because of both the time it takes to gather documents, and it's a minimum of a 6-month time period to present cases to the committee, and that's just to give statutory due process notice that is required.
And the individual involved is still teaching during that whole time period?
Correct. Except for the mandatory revocation offenses, the individual continues to be able to teach while the administrative proceedings are ongoing, whether within the commission itself or while they're waiting for an administrative hearing. So as these timelines lengthen, unfit people, we have 2 problems. One is that unfit people can continue to be in the classroom, but also I think it's equally important to talk about educators have a cloud over their head, and there isn't evidence to support the allegations, and they also deserve to have their names cleared. And we think both those functions are really important. And the longer the delay, the more that doesn't happen, to either protect the public or to protect the individual's reputation.
So we don't have a policy of having teachers that are in this process come to the campus, sit in a room the whole day, and then go home at the end of the day, which we've heard about in news articles.
Those are employment decisions made by the local district, and how each district handles them varies from district to district.
Okay, so that we could have that potential. Are you familiar with the documentary Waiting for Superman?
No, I'm not.
I am.
I'd encourage you to watch it. And then you'd understand where my question's coming from. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Morlock. Senator Allen.
Yeah, I just had a quick, well, first of all, a process question. So when these cases get up to the administrative law judge, who typically defends the teacher? Does the union, is it usually union lawyer?
So typically it is, yes. And there are times when the union may have a conflict of interest. So it may have, in other words, the allegation may involve two different teachers who are members of a union, so that the union may conflict out or may undertake the representation of one but not the other. And then there are times where the union just refrains or declines representation for whatever reason, and the individual is representing themselves.
And what's a typical case of the union refusing to represent the?
When there's a conflict of interest,
Oh, it's the conflict.
it's typically.
And then do they then pay for the legal expenses?
I'm not sure.
I'm not either.
Okay. But the union can't sort of decide that the case is too egregious or something and that they don't want to defend them. It has to be a conflict of interest.
I don't know.
I don't. Neither one of us have great taps into the strategies of unions, I'm afraid.
Okay. So I totally get. I'm here that you're looking to address the backlog. Like what more do we need to know about why it's taken the AG's office? Like why the reasons behind this backlog being allowed to have grown at the AG's office.
I think from the AG's office perspective is we do not have additional funding to hire additional positions. So I'm doing the best that I can in terms of trying to streamline the process, have dedicated attorneys whose litigation deadlines in terms of hard court deadlines are not interfering with their ability to solely dedicate their time and their function to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing cases. But until such time as I have authority to hire I have funding essentially for the DOJ to hire additional attorneys, I have to work with existing resources.
Right. So who makes those decisions? Is that made by the AG herself?
I think that's made by the legislature in terms of.
But the way that funds are allocated within the Department of Justice, we give out. Like we decide your.
No, there's federal and state.
The State Department of Justice. So is literally your line item section of the Department of Justice budget is determined by the legislature?
No, that's not accurate. I'm engaging. We have internal discussions ongoing right now, which is what I had referenced earlier in terms of exploring limited term options within the Office of the Attorney General, to hire additional positions in addition to the 5 dedicated CTC positions on top of the general attorneys handling